당선.
예. 저거.
Okay. Now we'll say the prayers on page number 10.
Sang la jia zhen jie la jia zhen jie gen den la jia zhen jie la ma la jia zhen jie sang jie la jia zhen jie jie la jia zhen jie gen den la jia zhen jie xie dang cu jin cu nang la shan che ba de dang ne jia zhen jie da ge jian cu ji wen cu nang jie du la pen xie sang jin zhe ben xiu sang jie qi dang cu jin cu nang la xiang che ba de dang ne jia zhen jie da ge jian cu ji wen cu nang jie du la pen xie sang jin zhe ben xiu tam zhe de wa dang de wei jie dang dan ber jie jie san jian tam zhe ding e dang ding e jie jie dang zhe ber jie san jian tam zhe ding e me de wa dang men zhe ber jie jie Sim chan tam che ni ran cha dan ni dan che dan nyang la ni wa jo jo sim chan tam che de wa dan de we je dan dan ba je sim chan tam che de nge dan de nge je je dan che wa je sim chan tam che ding me be de wa tam man je sim chan tam che ni ran cha dan ni dan che we dan nyang la ne wa jo jo be je shi chang me do chang ra ra lang zhen ni de jian ban de sang jie shang de mu de pe wa yi zhou gen nam de shang la jiu be zhou yi dang ge zhe ra na men zha la gang de ya da ya mu.
English. I take refuge in the Guru. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. From now until my enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And by the merit created in this practice, may I attain the state of Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings enjoy happiness in the cosmos. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings divine equanimity, feel violence, attachment, and anger. They surround the mountains and perfume, stone the flowers, one mirror, encircled by four planets, surmounted by the sun and the moon. I utilize this Buddha field and offering. May all living beings enjoy the pure now.
Manjana Kanaya Tayame. Ino bolite. Congo to the None, the Odan Japameja, Damajin, and Dojamo, Kutum Dino, Chantano, Tonian Jison, Danjuano, Chichis and Second. Chana Bemo Tanzia, Dona, so on the Soja 100. Again, Yao Kude.
Good.
No soon. That you know, Chitron numbers and Yonani, some just delays what that Tirangazo, Tiranginiman Mazo or Page, Gagua. To Nima didn't chambuja Tsio, the kinds in a name. Arizonga ne Mazoni Savilama. Jor Buchilane, Sergazan Tampuni Madikiore. Timba son Sadan Chasansi Gaga to Maruchire. Halea go John de Dios, the Animadilla.
First of all, my sincere greetings. Hello, and to you all, my spiritual friends, Dharma friends, and welcome. So I guess that I must share my joy or my special sense of happiness and that I really feel wonderful, and particularly today, and that is because today is a very special day. Back to the probably 1996, the 2006, and October this date, 16th, the U.S. Congress they offered it's the highest national medal. That's a congressional medal to our the highest supreme spiritual leader and teacher and guru. His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. And so think of this event and made my day feel very special. So I would like to thank you very much for the America and the American people. And so of course you are here, and thank you for your support.
Oh, then Tangazo Tiran Zinja, Tirangan Yizang Gumatsu, Tena, the Karsangoma, Dingamun Zindalangazo, the Tanyum Gokurti Marchi, that Tanyum Gokurti, and then Mazo, Takuran Tanyum Kurang, Zion Zambala, Mansu Kurang, Jamba Rujirida, Takurang Tsutokangiangazo, Tachichane, Deshe Tanyum Ziatan, and the Troa Tanyum Ziatan. Then also Tanyum Semezia, the Kuranga Tsu and Gua no Madamadas Yongu. Tachitanga Tanyum Ziati, Kuranga Rantona, Ta Inchignani, Kazani, Professor Kuranga Ketchan, that Sem Ziati, Dustankarzani, Neutrophasium, Mariniji Lojulain, the Poika, Manskat in its rani, Tanyum Inchi Karikarijazatinda. The Sims going to tear on Janati Tata, Tatas Guan, which you in the Hakum. The Sims Ziati Chitanga. 인치게 샘지나 땅아주 직발이잖아 오지를 받아 돈돈도 위나 땅아주 잘한다 오지 인인도 위나 그거 지찬도 직발이지 양지가 정해매하도 군이게 직발도 오지 진짜진살 땅아주 땅님지가나 두시 야당야 됐으니까 요네나 메네나 딱 그치 땅그 치초가 관계 다 만다와는 망부지 연구도 그 땅님지나 고지 샘지도니가 됐지 고아 더더더 연구요미 때 응한게나 지가 서서서 하고 문도데 to see Bason that Tonyum Kukutumuzritini, Chichanita Tonyum Tilangazo, Chua Tonyum, Deshe Tonyum, the Tonyum Chemezati, Kutskito and Kuamaramada Tinda Yungudu.
Okay. So before we touch upon our today's subject matter, or continue the discussion that we left in the previous Sunday. Let me quickly remind you, or kind of take you to reflect upon the very important concepts or term in Tibetan we call the Dangyung, which is in translation, translated into English, it's translated various, like impartiality, or even like the professor, Victor, I guess last week point out, something that suggests about neutral feeling, or equanimity, and the sort of being not unbiased, or not particularly sort of take a side. And it has in English, it seems like have all kinds of translations or translated in different way. To my own, I noticed yes, and to me, it seems all this translation to some extent is problematic. I'm not sure whether all this translation are in English appropriately or exactly reflected the actual or the original meaning, the contents of the Tibetan words Dang Nyung, that is again translated roughly about impartiality, or neutral, or unbiased, or even neutral feeling. And in any case, I must tell you that in Tibetan tradition, when you talk about the neutrality or impartiality, or equanimity, and as a translation of the Tibetan word Dang Nyung, in fact, there are 3 different forms of Dang Nyung, or the equanimity. First of all, we have the equanimity of feeling, and then we have the equanimity of volition, or mental formation, and then we have the equanimity of the immeasurableness, maybe. So among those 3 categories of neutrality or impartiality or equanimity, and I would say the right way to understand this concept of Buddhist notion of Dang Nyung, or equanimity, and it has to be dependent upon the context of each usage of this particular term. We must see how this term Dang Nyung or equanimity being applied. So if we see how it has been applied, I guess the English translation may have may be able to translate, have the right translation, the right term, and that genuinely reflected the actual meaning of the Tibetan term.
드니 당아조 당님 다 가르쳐고마 다 당님 그 그때스 지금 아주
I forgot one point. So the key thing here is that when you think about Tibetan concepts of Buddhist concepts of the equanimity, and you must know it cannot be restrained or explained within the scope of within the framework of feeling. So it's not only applied to the feeling, and it has to be something that's beyond the feeling or the sort of general mental phenomena. All that is.
That's what 당아조 다 당님 그 건데 아주 가리 지금 삼도 utang 소나 당아주 가정마 연구가 된 아주 디 체매자는 그 당님 체매 당아주 때 당이 가정마 지시 잠바다 프로페서 가제가 딜랜드 우트닝 디 랜드 우드스 다스군에 저 아랑송 삼도 다 도도는 오지 오는 아주 강서 바로옹이나 아주 다제 지요 초래 네 년제 지요 초래 아주 바마제 지요 초래다 강성 아주 아랑가 파라 삼도 잠바다 당아주 상추지 샴냥지 상추지 심지발라 띵원더니 샴바 당냥지 디 마르찬로 루구요레 디온지 강라 당아주 퍼게디라 저 수수그 심니 강성 바로 모디 수수 타직데 라징이와 요 말이 타직데 년쟁이와 요 말이 타직데니 예월도니 다치가 무시면 자요 말 당아주 띠 아주 지왕 엄마 당 치롱 엄마지 가자마제 등 아주 띠 가르자 단다가 친디나라 당우주 저 응음심데 저주가래 강에서는 당아도 벤더우지 정당아주 단더우지나 당아주 루 잡지가 원라니 아니 할리와 독본더우예 딘단더우예나 영지 루 카시지니 kachaji tu thima thingro susoni jimchi nang le kan ro chini dima ni tes mandga yons pare ta tinda ro zna nga ju mandu ni ma tinni ta nga ju khuting ga khung ga yin ta nga pe na song ji ka da ti tang ge yora ta nga ju nyen ro ji na nga ju angyo ni chen ro ji re ta susu ha ma ju wi ti na la ta ni ji ha ma ga susu wi ti le wi ti ma yin ba che kan de wa men de ju susu pen thong de tinda mang bu yora zi yong ba song zang ane nyen za ta nga ju ta chi den deng ye nyen yin 타지가 당인 등이 드라이 디매지니 딱 강서 추로고 아주 심전 탐체 디와던 디위지던 댐버지 중 아주 남지 체매진 동을 선바다 심전 탐체 질가나 디와던 디위지던 댐버지 주 대삼동 선바다 딱 강서 바로 모딜라 드라이나 타지다 드라진 제 요마르세 녀나 타지다 녀진 아주 수수 강서 지스니 두스 파란 제메서 그 강서 런이지 군이 자성하지 스고다 당님제데 수도 디라지 삼동 거요다 타지당 아주 다징이와 요말 타지다 년제용이와 요말 타지다 바마징이와 요말 바마드정 아주 무무시 미드준나다 루카시 지니니 무시는 아주 펜 토양 아주 조보서 된다 용스 그러와 데이터나면다 강서 런이지 파라 지 파라 미드조 지 다던 거 군니 단디 타지등이 자인 디 타지등이 년이 디 차지도 바마이지 디 삼노디 도하면 다 강서 바로 무이나라 디완 도바당 등에만 도바시 바임바레 그런 거 한게 녀몽 득심 거 응원대 지니 다 그런 게 라가면 손정 아주라 또 노바지 요라 노바지는가 다 두스 지금 소소 강서 하는 거다 삼노 지지 당하게 손이 또 삼노 던주 개침으로 오지래 다 돈돈도 오이나
Yeah. So last time at the end of the session, Professor again asked me the questions about equanimity. So I apologize that my answer was rather long and probably didn't really hit the point. And here, let me briefly again and rephrase what I have said in response to in reply, answered Professor Victor's question about the equanimity. And the most important thing we all needed to remember is that when we meditate, or try to meditate, the equanimity of Dangyun, and as a spiritual means, right? In our Dhamma practice, we have to know that essentially the form of equanimity, which we talk about, is we are talking the immeasurable, the equanimity that is appear in the four immeasurable thoughts, right? In four measurable thoughts, we know that may all sentient beings be happy and endure with happiness, and all way to may all sentient beings, right, and abiding in the equanimity. We do say the prayers where we cover this idea of equanimity. So then, how do I practice the equanimity of immeasurable in the context of four immeasurable thoughts? I guess essentially we have to know that in our own general day-to-day mind, we have a kind of a mentality that is we divided all the sentient beings roughly into three different kinds of beings, and the first of three different groups. First group we consider as our family and all beloved one. Let's say beloved one. This, the ones we love, we appreciate. And then we have this mentality. We're going to, in our mind, we're going to classify or label others who is opposed to us, who have done or is doing something which is against our will and or they make us difficult and painful, some bad things. And so we, in our mind, we tend to reserve some kind of space for those individual, a group of individual. We call them enemy or dislike, the ones that we dislike. And then in between, the vast majority, majority, we have this mentality of sort of ignore or contempt, right? Or apathy, or showing no apathy. So we have no feelings of closeness. We also don't feel, and they are sort of hostile or dislike to someone. We ignore. So this is really the problem. Okay, this is the obstacle we have to overcome in order to develop the genuine spiritual quality such as kindness, compassion. Right, kindness, compassion is the foundations of the bodhicitta, the altruism. So in order to develop the genuine kindness, compassion, and we must overcome this mentality of there are a group of people in our family or beloved ones, and those who are opposed and opposite from this group of beloved ones who are enemies, and then vast majority is neutral, or someone is ignored, a word of sort of be denial. And this attitude is the obstacle of the meditation of the equanimity of immeasurable thoughts. Okay. So equanimity, as one of the immeasurable thoughts, has to overcome this absolute sense of the enemy and friends, neutral, and so those are three categories. We must go beyond, above, overcome this fixed notion of enemy, fixed notion of friend, fixed notion of neutral or unknown or stranger. That is the thing we must overcome. Okay, and that's our objective in terms of to achieve to be successfully carried out our practice of equanimity in our meditation. And to overcome this absolute sense of friends, stranger, and enemy, we must think about take a two different approach. Right. The first approach is that think about the sentient beings from the reincarnation point of view. When you think about the reincarnation point of view, right, friends in this lifetime may not be the beloved ones. The beloved ones are in this lifetime and may not be the beloved ones in the previous lifetime. That's is certain. And the enemies of this lifetime, again, was not. There's no certainty was the enemy in previous lifetime. So those you think is a neutral or stranger, and they can be denial. In fact, it's not necessarily, and you didn't know, had no any relationship in the previous lifetime. So think about it, and this friends, how you label, how you look at it, and you examine your attitude to see how you look at a particular group as a beloved one, a particular group as an enemy, and a stranger, and then apply the Buddhist idea of reincarnation would help you to overcome or to reach the point, say, yeah, it is true, and they are here now is a friend, family, and a stranger, but in previous lifetime is not been it will not be the case. So, and secondly, and you also can think, and the ideas or experience of yourself, like in this life alone, right? Like you had someone know for 10 years, 15 years, and you become very good friends, or the relationship between you and a particular individual, in the case of family, like the parents and children, right? And think about this. Now, there are lots of cases, you be a friend with someone for 10, 15 years, but one day, or because in the one particular event, you and him or her or them, due to a particular things or event, you disagree with each other so badly, and then become hate each other. So we have to have this kind of many cases, right? Our experience tells us that happens all the time, correct? And similarly, in terms of enemy, there are a group of individuals who used to be your enemy, or you dislike them, or him or her so bad. But because of a certain thing, or for a particular reason, and then you become very good friends and no longer hate each other. So that's, again, we have plenty of examples for that. And even in the case of family, like generally we think that the parents and the children's relationship should be natural, strong, and sort of helping each other, right, all the time. And in fact, this is not necessarily always true. There are cases, many cases, that the parents who give the birth to the children, they may went away, or they stay in the far away, or even the nearby. The relationship between them are not as close as we generally believe. In fact, there are looks like someone who is totally unrelated. They don't know each other, nothing in common. However, and those people who kind of take the position or play the role as the children, and they help those aged person, serve them like their parents, or serve him or her as a parent. So therefore, when you apply this kind of world situation, then think about the Buddhist concept of reincarnation. It would help you to overcome our sort of a fixed, solid an idea or a belief of a friend and enemy and the neutral ones. And so I think that's something we must use and to reach the state of genuine equanimity. And lastly, I also would like to say the way to bring yourself to the genuine state of equanimity is that even you find that someone who make you unhappy, right, and you are angry about it, but think of this way: oh, he or she or they did so is because under the influence of the afflictive emotion, and they are disturbing emotions actually are the one who tortures a particular individual or group of individual. So under this strong afflictive emotion, and then that person become mad or angry and it hurts me. So he or she is not entirely, absolutely independently did so, but rather is due to the afflictive emotions. So think of this way, you can also, it also can help you to reach the state of equanimity. That's all.
나서 드네 땅아주 가슴 거 참드니 마 루선나 긴가 디자요 지라긴가
나중에 손나게 바체 위트 차이나 가서 키니모스가 이나마나 세트선다이 되게 손나다 가래 손나
단디네 보이글라카나
저거 주니바래 많이 저거 대주라도
알아 근데 지금 말이야 근데 고노 말씀 냠티오네 자시 탐발라카나 다 만남정도 빠용스 초위다 덴루드저 시카시가 세지티 칸투 딘데 자자리 Tendu namcha sigla sig sawa tang chua tang sopa tang number chewa la sope dinge number mongpu nyong khuner nungu zi ta di mi ge dinge ti khatin ja jari.
我也这个那么就送了那没查过啊。
Me namchang dopa yong se chowe phone sigla sig khwa tang nopa shepa tang digpa tang chewa tang madigpa tang chepa wo shang wo phone li chewa la sope dinge pagda me pa nyam su nyong nungu zi.
年是牛，他们就是3年是牛，我也。
아마 저사다 가상 때 강떡도네 남 덴로 남자 시글라 식사와당 추와당 소바당 남버 치와도 디라 딘서자라
懂，闽南讲的懂。
네 야드니
Okay, now let's go to our translation copy. Once you have a documental scheme, there are those concepts. I guess on page 62, right? So therefore, see all wandering beings as immersed in a great fire of misery. Think that they are all like you in not desiring misery at all. Alas, all my beloved sentient beings are in such a pain. What can I do to set them free and make their suffering your own? Sufferings your own. Whether you are engaged in one-pointed meditation or pursuing your ordinary activities, meditate on compassion at all time. Focus on all sentient beings and wishing that they all be free from suffering. Begin meditation. Oh, that probably is not. This is on that. The compassionate mind has naturally. 니와 예덕 그들은 정말 성찰하라.
마 티오나요. 단다 티오니 말아. 니와 이다가 등에 살선
어디 아니로는 뛰어올라요. 네.
티오네. 단다 말지 니와 이다가 때나 티오나요. 티오다가 그랬다. 니와다 이다가 등에 티오나다 든루 등에 요라. 드니 미게 등에 티 가도잖아.
Okay. Yeah, last time we talked about in order to develop the kindness and the compassion, we needed to reflect upon the sufferings that enduring by the hungry ghost and the hell being and the animal being, and we left where the human beings are experiencing the sufferings, kind of sufferings that human beings are enduring. I'm having a little trouble to locate that piece of information on my translation here. You can see that the human being, oh, that is, sorry, yeah. Okay, in the 62, in the middle, right? From the top, I guess 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 8, line 8, number 8, okay? We can see that human beings too experience various acute kind of pain, not able to find what they want. They are resentful and harm each other. They suffer the pain of losing the beautiful things they want and confronting the ugly things they do not want, as well as the pain of poverty. That's the
알랭이 마 돈주디 갱이 돈 살아.
Pachi inside something. The Nyas Nyonga Shawos did a lot.
오레레레 드네 냠스뇽 샤오.
Yeah, they said some. Alright,
드니다 말아 네다 단디 갖고 친전저나 단디 원랑 아조네 아다 두아르 그 등에는 거니 녀와가 등에 루타레더니 다 든루 등에 된 루타레다 드니 녀가 등에 갖게 되서라 다 메인 남정 도바 용스 초비 폰이 시글라시 코와 당제가다 아주 미드주나 다티 통한 원전저리 아주 아니 수수가니 도파티 사이니다 티 마르가지리다 시글라시가다니 지 코와 당제자 당와 당 지가 노파체티 용고 요레더니 리치치가 노파시 그 요레 드니 수수 아니 도파나진 체크요 말에 수수 만도바 자탄 tumte yang take yung go yore cheta tani opon li jawala sope dinge pota me pa nyam sinyo atan ta jikum go dinge tum de ta san dam da thoi de ta ti ngyo ni chera ti ta ta yung go yore ta dinge ko tani kanta do chala sope nyomo wa kni chiwan ha so simchiga ta thoma ta jirga ta nga zo ni chimna ni mi de zuna la da ani ti do chata nyomo ta ngonte jirugo 아니 지 심트니 두세니 강에 연구 요래 강타 타왕은 바 남바 나서 장장 버진이 디터 탐제 등에지 제임비 개가나 득바 흔더 아니 젠데 흔더 등 농고 지가 아니 다 랍트 송한테 주이나라 수수 타왕은 바제디 수수지 축던 좀 타와 아 수순도 바는 마용 타와다 타왕 안에 지고란 직다 터타 녹타제다 타왕은 베강거 오 수수 양 등에금도 비 등에 띄오니 개칸나 득바신스는 아주 까박하나 쩍 가즈네 와나제 마다 수수 자자마제 나나 마 양아스가냐 거요라 오티 등에리 다 니가 등에 뭐지 디탄 딸 하게 등에 온데도
Okay. So if we go a little bit more about the human beings particular suffering, and then that's like the text says here continuously, and there are other those minds are born by various fetters of disturbing emotions like craving, desire. Others are in turmoil with different types of wrong views. These are all causes of misery. Therefore, they are always painful, like being on a precipice. So up to here, and we have talked about the sufferings of hellish being and hungry ghost and animals. Right now, here we are particularly focused on the sufferings of the human being, and that we are experiencing. Of course, the sufferings of a human being, generally speaking, that's quite obvious, right? We all sort of, one way or another, know all kinds of the human sufferings, right? Since it is not a hidden phenomenon, and we, one way or another, we have experiences, or we saw others went through. And so therefore, the human suffering is not only pervasive and obvious, but is involved with a great variety. And so many of us probably also went through, and like you want to be with someone, or brought yourself to a ideal place, or do something that you really like. However, it just can't make it happen, right? Oppositely, by contrast, you do not want to meet someone and deal with him or her or them. You do not want to take that do that thing, or you do not want to live there. However, somehow you have to deal with that very difficult people whom you don't like at all, and the job you hated so much, and the place you do not want, it doesn't make you happy. And we're just doing that, right? We always find ourselves in such a kind of situation. And of course, it even not apply to you as individually, but we know human beings in general. When you look around throughout the world, you see that many human beings who suffered due to the lack of adequate food, who is being hungry, and others suffered because of the water shortage, and so that's all the kind of physical, right, and troubles, and strike them and every day. And then our most problems for the country, the people who are relatively living in a better place, and they suffer due to the lack of material resource. However, they might experience tremendous sufferings caused by attachment or desire. Right? So desires for the householders, particularly in many cases, are inexpressible because you have to handle so much financial responsibilities, household works, and you're responsible for various the work, and you are being pulled sort of all kind of different directions, and things and the events just occur but one after another and give you no chance to appreciate and enjoy yourself in that peace. Similarly, there's also as a human being, the troubles are the ordained individuals who are like monks and nuns who supposedly abandoned leave the family, abandon the household life, and they supposedly they should enjoy all kind of peace and happiness and contentment, but there are often, and due to the causes of due to the misview or bad view, but the difference of philosophical views. And here in the Buddhism, particularly due to the five bad views, and so the ordained monks maybe they would arguing, disagree with each other, and so then they have to find themselves. Then they find themselves in the kind of confrontational situation. And so those five views could be like the wrong view, extreme view, and like the views of the one's precepts considered as superior, and the views of the contemporary view, the contemporary thing as real. So all those views takes them to the situation where they may find themselves as if staying at the edge of cliffs, and almost like if they have to be always very careful, otherwise we will fall into the well. Or fell off from the edge of the cliffs. So meaning that they have to experience many troubles. That's because that's the kind of because of the human and a form of the human sufferings, and they have to deal with it. Jigta therta lokta tawa chungis tawa de kon Google
jigta tharta lokta chim teshin zo da chungji da jigta tharta lokta ta zo ni chim teshin ji zon da ne da chungji da da su gu jin do ba na je da ji chot zong din do ba na je ma yong de li dingeli de ni dna da ku jana na ku tsna ge khana de ba na je ga ti zen do当아주 저거 가지나요 나지로 다 순도 봐뭐 등에 띄운 거 저거라마 사냥 가요 그래서 당황한 바가 건가 어느 스나티 손정도 와
So the five views are like a wrong view. Wrong view, of course, is a denial of the cause and effect, or law of causality. It's like a nihilism and annihilation, and others like the view of absolutism. And then the view of one's the form of precepts is superior than all other from others, and then the view of the superiority of one's own philosophical view or the tenets, right? So the audience, men and women, might suffer due to this kind of troubles. Some of them, particularly, once they strongly, absolutely believe their sets of monastical discipline or the vows or precepts they received is absolutely superior, and that sense of superiority, believe, will make them find a lot of trouble. And at the same time, those who claim or consider the particular tenets of philosophical tenets, the view, and then they follow is a superior. So thereby they push very hard and try to convince everyone or convert everyone to that under that particular view, and they see, and it's a hard job, and so people don't do what they wish. So therefore, they find a lot of times and themselves are quite unsatisfied with their hard preachings or works. So that's again this form of suffering.
Tene ta hanam tangi yamara logo lugindage.
Yeah.
Hanam jang ta ngajo tendu chare nye chare tene ta laga dinge ta ngajo karja. Dinruwa zhe niwa ye to tendu lama yinze ta dinruwa ge laga dinge tisong gorga. Hanam jang tamche njirwe dinge nye ji dinge wa tagde dopa na chupe la kanta yinba ti tona tagda chepuwa ta tongwa la sopin jikpe nyangin ji simna no na chetardi. Deshe ji dinge nye ji li tong nyomo ye chanye ji je zhen ji gangi ngo nye tang. Keche riri lan jikpe ngan jing ji chanye ti ruwa tamche la chawa yin no. Dewe na ruwa tato na dinge ji meshchin barwi nang da shikpa yinbi te la. Chetar da dinge mando batar zhen tamche jang te tang rawo nyambi. Nyamda samshang. Ane jima jiha dagla digbi simchen da dinge na dinge tili chetar tarwashashi dagnya dinge wa zhen da shechang te tang trawan do pe nambi nyangji ti tangen zalan dig jongrong jolon tamche da rong ti tamche da simche tamche la gumbar shati is ane thoma kuna zashi ji sho namna chetar mhobe dinge hachu nyamsu nyongwa thongor gumbar sha os.
Okay. So we finished the discussions of reflections on the form of the basic sufferings that humans are experiencing. Now let's go and see how the gods and goddesses are experiencing the suffering. So what kind of sufferings that they have to deal with? Okay. Now, so let's read. God suffer the misery of change. For example, signs of impending death and their fall to unfortunate states constantly oppress the mind of God of the desire realm. How can they live in peace? Pervasive misery is what arises under the power of causes characterized by non-virtuous actions and disturbing emotions. It has the nature and the characteristics of momentary disintegration and pervades all wandering beings. Therefore, see all wandering beings as immersed in a great fire of misery, think that they are all like you in not desiring misery at all. Alas, all my beloved sentient beings are in such a pain. What can I do to set them free and make their sufferings you are on, whether you are engaged in one-pointed meditation or pursuing your ordinary activities? Meditate on compassion at all times, focus on all sentient beings, and wishing that they all be free from suffering.
Tene ta ngazo duwa riting nga ta ngazo dindruwa sim ta ne ngen duwa sim skiore ta thama ti ngazo dindruwa sim nga tha ma thama ying dinge ta ngazo tha ga dinge ti shem gora ta tha nam kya ne dinge wa dongwa ni ti ta tha thamche na ta ngazo tan dobil tha da na ta dola ritri yora ja chen ri jo ane sim chi sa sim garden cheka gente kan shi ta ngazo mila dinge yo ma sa tha nam kya ya dinge ka ri sa tha ga dinge ti su ta ngazo 미가 등에 따니 텐로 등에 좀 아주 원스미터니 이니 그러나 통지 요래 달 하가 등에 도 가리여즈나 따티 가리존나 가리손나 달 답이나 아주 제칠 그지가 하려 오지나나 다 고조 수조 등에디 아니 츠포이 등에디 요스 근데 수조 츠포와 따니 다 하제디 문시 요 손자 수수 간이 지니나디 타상 하고 그랬어 근데 당 아주 하제디 지찬이나 아주 시키 니메 놓쳐 좀 배면 핸들에 당 아주 지 롱년나 좀 하마우 하당 하모지가 배냥 주다 배시랑도 깨랑도 된다 통고요라 나 그저 등에디 간이나 다 그저 치위 갑디라 초왕원데 죽을다 가서 니마 든스가 원디라다 그저 딱 남다 용 그랬어 근데 다 그저 지 리아트마 가지는 뭐 지던가 배 하트존나 배 리아트마랑 시그지 아주 메너제 트마지 심부딘다 주마고 징엠바 지마고 하는 그왜 트마 심부딘다 그랬어 근데 하트조 딱 그거 치위 디촌도 통용 거지가 초왕원데 지네 니마 든스가 원나다 딱 그배 리아스와 트마카고 딱 그진 도배지 냥조만도 디차 게드 줄라 냥바차 다디 좀 먹었어도 하게 되겠디 다 도시 온다가 다 할하모도 주나나 다 지기지기서 지기 용거 말했나 고스라딜라 다 그거지 지가제 치위 등에 등원데 주고는 하고서 따가디나 어달 하게 등에 주주들이다 땅 아주 하가 간다고이나 하가 식식 그띵 아주 미에가나 melong arch thambati thag shig shig ris ko kuma da tumoz inde ga ta nima dinz na ta khame na mezera ta kuzo dinge ti osara thag dinge roti
All right. Okay. So just a quick reminder that in order to develop the kindness, genuine compassion, kindness and compassion, so we have a reflect on the sufferings of those three lower realms. Those three lower realm beings who born in the three lower realms. That means the hellish being, hungry ghost, and the animal being. And we also discussed about the three good rebirth. We have talked about the first of the three good rebirth, and that is a human being, right? The sufferings of a human being. Although yes, a human beings are considered around within the six realms of six different classes of all sentient beings. Human beings considered belong to the realm of three good realm or higher realm. But yes, just like we have having seen, there's so much troubles and that human beings has to endure. Now here we are going to talk about the sufferings of goddess, the god and the goddess, or the celestial being, right? So celestial being, goddess, and particularly in the context of the realm of desire, we have talked about the god and goddess from the six There are 6 different kinds of them from the desire, the realm of the desire. And then we have the 4 great kings of the 4 directions and their retinues. And then we have this the 33 different classes of celestial beings, right? So in other words, when you look at Buddhist understanding of the celestial being or heavenly being and or God and goddess, you will find that many different kinds of them, right? So all of them are, as we explained, which we generally know, and even from cultural point of view, the God and goddess by name, they're powerful, superior, happy, and good, right, and so on and so forth, as if they have no any sufferings. In fact, from Buddhist point of view, and although those gods and goddesses are indeed superior, powerful, and they have a great life. Nevertheless, they got one serious suffering, and that they have been enduring. That is the suffering of the death. As Buddhist literature repeatedly make the reference that God and goddesses, by its power, they have this kind of a gifted power, and or they've been endured with, born with the superior, the sense of front knowing, or the sense of what you call the clairvoyance, right? And they can predict it. Not predict. They knew ahead of time the things are in advance, particularly, and they knew when they would be die when the time is closer. So when the time about to die in advance, they will know in advance that very the superior power of knowledge of clairvoyance, which reveals the true reality of their death, and then after death, put them in the tremendous, make them very stressful, and the tremendous pressure. So that whereby they suffered quite a lot, right? So as the Buddhist literature, again, generally speaking, all the culture, and they all them kind of agree, the god and goddesses and have no idea about sufferings of the lack of food or lack of clothes. All those things are been naturally provided, and they have no any worry, and they don't need to do anything. They just naturally have those things with them. So and then they have this power of flying across the sky, and they have this beautiful perfume or odor, and they carry with them, and then they're wearing all kinds of the celestial clothes. And the gowns, and it's gorgeous and in the best quality, and so on and so forth. But again, like we talked about, somehow 7 days before they die, and then they would see the sign of their death. They fell. They're going to fail. They're going to reborn, forced to reborn, and at that point. And then they scared a lot, and they suffered tremendously. And particularly when those 7 days started kicked in, what happened is, they usually normally they carry the lights in their body, and those lights become dimmed. And normally they have this very pleasant odor and with their body. But when the time come in and they see the light, not only is a light dimming and disappearing, but the body develops some kind of very bad smell. At the same time, their clothes is kind of become ragged and very bad looking and looks very ugly. And because of that, and those other goddess who haven't yet exhausted their merits, they seen such a terrible situation, and then they will flew away. They do not want to be with those falling and the god and the goddess. At that point, and then whoever is fallen, the god and goddess will suffer more, because now he or she are absolutely alone and lonely, and then suffered even more. So speak of the suffering that God and goddess are going to endure, and from the time point of view, and according to literature, one and the god and goddess one night, a day in the heaven, and for God and goddess, which is equivalent to 50 years and human beings here on earth. So now take a moment and think about it. 50 years in human time, which is the one day for God and goddess, right? But they have to go through such a 7 days in total, and then you can imagine what kind of sufferings that they have to endure.
드네 당아조 디오온드나 당아조 가시 그도다 트리리리 까먹구나 드네
It's 1 o'clock.
간도는 아주 등에스면 등에딜라 등에스면 요라 당아조 등에지 등에네 안지리 등에 다 차와드시지 등에지 등에스면 거래 다 등에도 졸라 마라 안데시 제본 잠발라 당아조 등에지 등에 잠발라 아조다 남진 아조다 지가 나지디 차상하다 등에지 등에 줘라 드네 미지기 나야라 지 드네 기위 등에 나위 등에디 차상 등에지 등에지 다지 천선로 간도 고든로 오지나 드네 지리 등에 잠발라 당아조 대시 담모부지 용도 드네 당아조 시페잖아 아주지 아르티크 사와치 뭐 카틀라 양지 시모드 뭐 지 에시오스도 뭐 컴바스 간즈나 카트가당 아주지 디와지 용거다 지 사와티 군도 냐니 아니 정모 차여다 그 지랑보지 되는구나 영 정위 등이 영 등이 정거 차기부 강에 띄는 거요라 다디 지리 등에 이제 오지래 드네 아주 지리 등에 디 정거나 가리송자잖아 아주니 다 쪽부니오지나 다루 잡지 종아랑 쪽보랑 되게 돼 담보들가 지지가 빼지 zansa gensa 되게 지지보까지 좀 뭐지 단 조건 지지가 휴전통 드네 지지가 만득하는 것도 뭐 당아주 때 지촌낭 이원이 세운 거라 다디 지리 등가 지 두세운 것도 다 차와 득시지 등에 제 아주 아주 단에 덴바지가는 거다 어떻게 되는 거다 제치죠 당아주 다 존엄만 지금 아주 나 지금 말찬으로 어디 된지군이 온 거요라 맞다가 등에 동동매지야티 뛰는 거니 등에 덴바기 제치지는 거니 맞다가 등에 동동매지데 아니 저한테시지 등에 뛰는 등에들이 다 리뉴지 장아 장비자 등에 와 인디 리뉴지 장아 장비서 다 리도 뇽무지 아주 강아지나 강아다 수수 리서니 뛰는 거 뛰던 수수니 제가 뇽모 특성 그런 거다 수수 링엔 바지나 링엔 바 리서나 내지나 다 저한테시지 등에 제티 안 루어트 차탄이 차위더라 어다 등에서 보고 지가로 돈으로 뛰는 지래
덴지는 그 등에 제가 생각하다
덴지가 제치 담보요
차와드시 등에 이게 대화대가 되죠
맞다 등에 통통매 가지고니 덴바지가는 거 덴바주때 등에 덴바 근종 덴바 고대 남된 주라 다 뛰는 거니 등에 덴바들 제치지요라 맞다가 등에와 동아 드메지 뛰는 거 등에 들대 제치기는 거 맞다가 등에지 등에와 인디 이 종원나니 리도 뇽몬지 장아 잼비셔서 다고 리도 뇽몬거 그런 거 당아주 뒤집어는 받던 가 차상아주 리도 뇽몬거 거라 뒤 차상 저한테 등에서 된 로아르트가 쳐요 다 쳐고요 다 로아르 겐도 딘두냐 겐도스 다 딘두스 차상 쳐도 저한테 등에서 당아주 양치당야 단 제로 등에서 아주 감 공막을 하트 줄라는 제위 등에 요고요 말다 말이 등에지 등에 요요 말다 그 좋아 당념 감 공막을 하트 줄 다티 말아지니 용고지려
야야 Okay, so let's take a look at Maluma.
말에 로단에 단단 딘나요 로사리 디바다 다 오늘 냥지 군방 고고 로사라 다 띠오나 말이 자산 로조 로다리
왜 저한테 되는 거래?
로타려 띠 오늘 로자로서
Yeah, 그냥 이든 로드 채선 좀 로와.
아네
Okay. The three sufferings, I think, okay, below assumption being set. Provided. Yeah, actually we did. Okay. So now let's take a moment to think about the sufferings in general. Right. In general, there are three different kinds of sufferings. The suffering of dukkha, and the translation is the suffering of suffering, and the suffering of the change, and the pervasive suffering. So among these three sufferings, that suffering and apply actually to all the beings in these three sufferings are the basic categorization of the sufferings, right? Now let's see what are the three sufferings are, how it's explained. So first of all, suffering of dukkha, suffering, that is the suffering which also translates suffering of pain. Generally in the Buddhist literature, and the example we will find is often is like the four different sufferings. That is the suffering of pain, right, and the suffering of aging, and or age, suffering of age, and the suffering of illness, and the suffering of pain, the death. So those four sufferings is examples of the suffering or suffering of dukkha. Then the next type of suffering is called suffering of change. Suffering of change, and different literature sometimes make a different, interpret it differently. But they all agree. One thing is the true examples of like a feeling. For example, then you feel hot. You stay somewhere, you feel hot. And like summer, and you were in the outside the house, you feel hot, and now you want to going back to the house, in the house equipped with the AC, air conditioning, right? And you get in, and you feel cool, very good, and comfortable. But if you're forced to stay there for an excessive period of time, now the beginning, the form of a sort of a pleasure and the comforting, comfortable, now it's turned in become as an unbearable coldness, and now you feel cold, and you suffer because it is too cold there. So this is obvious the example of suffering of a change. In the more little subtle way, the suffering of a change also can be find through the examples. This again in the Buddhist literature, it makes a reference, and it have an example for instance, like you are so fond of someone, and you both are feel so close, and you've been working together, spend time together, and you are very good friends, right? But later on, and due to some kind of unexpected events, or some bad things happened between you and that person, between you two, and then now so you no longer see each other as very close and very nice, but rather you become hate each other. So that's the sense of a very close and good and friendliness. Now it's become and hostile and against it, and reject, and that change of the relationship and give you the strong the pain of the broken relationship. So this is another example of the suffering of the change. Now let's take a moment to look at what is pervasive suffering. Pervasive suffering is more or less a bit subtle, and so it requires some a diligent inquiry. In order to fully understand it. So obviously, from the name itself, you can see pervasive suffering is unsatisfaction, which is pervasive, right? Which is sort of a universal. But the way through the Buddhist literature to understand the pervasive suffering is we need to understand the Four Noble Truths of Buddha Dharma. So Four Noble Truths of Buddha Dharma, which we all know, is the foundations, right, of entire Buddhist Buddhist system, right? And and the Four Noble Truths, obviously we know that Noble Truth of suffering, Noble Truth of causes of suffering, Noble Truth of cessation, and Noble Truth of the path. And the pervasive suffering is belong to the first and Noble Truth. This is Noble Truth of suffering. So Noble Truth of suffering has four characters. Well, can be characterized in the four different dimensions. The first dimensions of Noble Truth of suffering, dukkha, is impermanent, right? And then the second one is the suffering itself, and the third is empty, and the fourth is no self or anattama. So anattama, empty, and impermanent, and the suffering. So that is the pervasive suffering is the suffering which we talked about, and within the framework of the Four Noble Truths. Okay, so why the suffering that is a part of the four characteristics of the Noble Truth of suffering is considered to be pervasive, right? Labeled as a pervasive suffering. That is because, like the scripture says, whoever, right, in experiencing the samsaric reality existence, then he or she has to deal with the karma and afflictive emotions, right? Or he or she is being subject or is being sort of oppressed, governed by one's own karma, and that's the one created, and one's own afflictive emotions. So because of this reason, and the pervasive suffering are being considered is one of the first Noble Truth of suffering. One of the characteristics of first Noble Truth of suffering. That's all.
그래서 다 디소한 거 가루차 손더니 다 이런 게 때문에 저한다였나?
So I guess we are running out of time, and do you have any questions or comments based upon what we have talked about today?
나서 답이저 좀
I just wanted to cross-check the understanding. So the reason why we're thinking of suffering is once we've developed equanimity, we're thinking of suffering to develop and kindle our compassion for all beings, because all beings are in this state of suffering. And then understanding the many different natures of suffering gives us even more foundation to understand that kind of, develop that kind of compassion.
Oh yeah. Ko lantan di jikyo na mena te chu shunase nga to ko ni di tanyo ni o di dan really tone nga to di dungen di ma tanyo stande tanyo da ni ninji paro dewa de gontan ko tone gomer chete ni nga to kamo mo su chonga ba ta tina ninji dungen di le swase Thank you, Guan. No, you mentioned the Parisna. Also, G. Dungendi, G. Chan, Dungens and the Rindos, and the Shiva ina, that's Mijama Dungendi Number, social Dungendi Number, a social number of Mila Gores at the data, Tonian teaching. Gonde was down. The Tonian de la Tene, Niji and Jada. Or that the Gala that covered the shit of the lower really. And then do make our young one. This way, daily jump that nearby. What deep result in any ninja gomel sheet cherry young at I'm on the control. Then this she made also something that was she questioning user.
Oh, let's touch deep picture inside some do kinds in the Tangazo. Dua ritikan ngane ta ngendua ngazo haku mara ta ngazo mi ta tendru ga ani ngazo dinge nyon ta ti ta ngazo haku ya ta tendru na ta gana chi shejong dua ta sumbu chi chi sa gi dora ta ngazo ta chitang gi kha sa du ngazo cha sang du chi yor da na tendru ju chi na ku pe sumbu ta du zu ku sho che ba de sa yor da ngazo ting ngoyon ne chera tendru na de sange ta chang gu ti ta simje nyam chong du pe du se se ni du se yong go yor de mi dinge na ngazo thongchi nyong jere 소소니다 도바타 마티와 만도바타 테와 두스 뇽고요 따티 차상아 아주 지 심제 찌게 등에 심제 탐제니 디완도 바타 등에 만도 바시 바이엔지 두 삼로 당용 지가 당아주 당념 대용하라 따 등에 리리 하고는 아주 땡인종도 지지 지니 데니다 냥지 구매다 샴바 구매티 두스 용고요라 띵원도 손 두스 차념무지 용고용고 데니 샴냥지 따 상수지 심지 두스 용고요래 띵이 더더리 삼도 디 그런 게배 Yeah,
personally, I think your interpretation is quite remarkable, and it's very good because like you pointed out, yes. So if we understand the suffering in general from general point of view. And then we know it is a reality, right? And then we can think about that very brutal reality, how it applies to the all sentient beings, right? We know even we have no direct interaction and have no direct knowledge about or realization about the sufferings of hungry ghost and the hellish being. Those are two of the three lower wrong beings, but at least we know for sure one of the three lower wrong bad rebirth or lower wrong or bad rebirth, which is animal being, right? In the animal world, so you see that we actually witnessed that a lot, in many cases, the very aggressive and animals such as like tiger, lions, and those most powerful and aggressive animals, they catch and others and just swallow them, and while they are still alive, they just eat up and brutally and without any consideration. And So, and it just caused the other animals tremendous pain, which of course, when you see this kind of thing, and it will make you wonder what kind of suffering is going on there, right? And it naturally give you, make you feel very compassionate, right? You want to do something about it. And then move to the human world, right? Forget about the celestial being, the sufferings that they're enduring, but at least in human context, we know that we are suffered from time to time, and because unfulfilled desire, right? And unwanted frustrations and disappointment and even pain, and right, both mentally and physically. So when you think about you and others who are experiencing this kind of suffering, and then as far as the pain are concerned, from animal being, by human being, and all are equal. Right? There's no exceptions. And so our situations and from the painful, the pain or the suffering, misery, and from the misery point of view is equal. There's no exception, right? So think of this way, and then gain a strong conviction, and then bring it into your spiritual practice. Then it will definitely help you to develop a genuine compassions. So I think that the bottom line is your interpretation is remarkable, is great.
라조드네 다 니마 체가딜라니 차청나니 조용의 문제시고요. 당아주 군바로는 때는 배 공성첨부리 프디 야가스고다 배 공성첨부리 다때는 참고로 미치 서비스는 더 부인 봐요. 선자 아니 닌셰딜라니 차청나니 조용의 문제시고요.
Okay, and that's all for today. And I wish, before you leave, I wish you have a very pleasant rest of your Sunday, and it is a very pleasant one. And so I'm thinking about India, back to India today. As a monk in the monastery, we are having a great time because it is a day off today. And so here we have the day off on Sunday, and again, and happy and have great in the rest of your Sunday.
Closing prayer on page number 88.
Semjo Rambo Che Maji Wana Je Jewa Nyamba